As the Senate prepares for the impeachment trial next week, President Trump is setting up his defense team. CBS News has confirmed it will be led by White House counsel Pat Cipollone and the president's personal attorney, Jay Sekulow. Ken Starr, whose investigation led to the impeachment of President Bill Clinton, is also on the team, as well as Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard professor, served on O.J. Simpson's legal team. He also defended convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. One name not on the list, Rudy Giuliani. The president's personal attorney told CBS News White House correspondent Paula Reed he wanted to be a member of his defense team. Meanwhile, there's considerable attention on one of Giuliani's associates. Lev Parnas is speaking out after he turned over documents to House investigators. Parnas was indicted for violating campaign finance laws, and he is pointing the finger at a number of Trump administration officials who he says all knew about the efforts to force Ukraine into investigating Joe Biden. In an interview, Parnas also said the president tried to fire former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, quote, 4 or 5 times. He also claims Yovanovitch was under surveillance. Today, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo denied knowing Parnas. He also said he never heard that Yovanovitch was being tracked. However, he now says the State Department will, quote, evaluate whether there was something that took place there. Let's bring in CBS News' Natalie Brand on Capitol Hill, McClatchy congressional reporter Emma Dumain, and Associated Press White House reporter Jill Colvin. Welcome to all of you. Natalie, let me begin with you. How are lawmakers reacting to the allegations by Parnas?
Well, Tanya, a number of Democratic lawmakers say that his documents released this week raise a lot more questions and make clear that new witnesses and additional documents, additional evidence should be admitted during the Senate trial. Republicans, on the other hand, question his credibility and point out that he's facing charges in a separate campaign finance case. And the lead impeachment manager, Adam Schiff, put out a statement yesterday saying he's still going through some of this new material, the new interviews. We've seen him appear on cable news a couple of times now, and House committees have released a trove of new documents from Parnas, including these text messages and various messages between Parnas and Rudy Giuliani. Adam Schiff saying he's still going through that material and ultimately will review his potential testimony during a Senate trial. But as you know, that's something that is up to the senators themselves. And the Republican-controlled Senate, it would take a simple majority to compel witnesses, but that means that all Democrats would have to be voting in favor of that, and at least 4 Republican senators also voting with Democrats. Now, while a few Republican senators have indicated they may be open to hearing from additional witnesses, they've made clear that they want to hear opening arguments from both sides first.
And Jill, the president has also tried to distance himself from Parnas, despite there being photos of the two of them together at Mar-a-Lago. I want to play for you what the president said yesterday about his allegations. Let's listen.
You have now the Ukrainian president and the foreign minister of Ukraine saying there was nothing done wrong. In fact, they said there was absolutely no pressure whatsoever. Everything was perfect, and they impeach. It's totally partisan. We had 100.
So, Jill, is the White House at all concerned about what Parnas has to say? Because he certainly has a lot to say.
He certainly does, and some of the documents that he turned over to House investigators there were certainly very interesting, including that letter in which Rudy Giuliani represented himself as the president's personal attorney working outside of government channels in his efforts in Ukraine. What we've seen the president do here is try to distance himself from Parnas as much as he can. It's a tactic that we've seen the president use before when it comes to people like Paul Manafort, other folks who are part of his circle who have gotten into legal trouble. He insisted that despite the fact that there are photographs of the two men together. I mean, there are photographs of Parnas with a large number of members of the president's inner circle. But the president said that he takes pictures with thousands of people during the course of the year. It doesn't necessarily mean that he knows them. He doesn't remember having any conversations with them. And at this point, the White House seems to just be trying their best to ignore these new allegations. They're continuing to push forward with the legal strategy and the communication strategy that they have been using since several weeks now, insisting that the president did nothing wrong here, that this is a politically motivated trial, and hoping that the Senate will move to dismiss him, despite the fact that that does not seem very likely, or sorry, to dismiss the case against him.
And Jill, just to follow up on some more of what Parnas revealed or allegedly revealed, Pompeo is now saying the State Department will look into whether Ambassador Yovanovitch was under surveillance. But then he also said, I doubt we'll find anything there. So does this indicate that the State Department is or is not treating this issue seriously?
Well, look, Pompeo was under tremendous pressure here for 72 hours. The State Department, he and his aides refused to issue any response to these very alarming charges that an ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, was potentially under surveillance, felt like her life was in danger, new evidence emerging that she had real reason to be concerned here, and just crickets from the State Department. So finally, you had Mike Pompeo today in a series of interviews with conservative radio hosts saying that he will, investigate this, saying it's his duty as, the leader of the department to look into any threats against any member of the staff there. But clearly, he does not believe that these allegations hold much water here. When you've got somebody who says that they're going to investigate something on one hand, but on the other says, but we don't expect to find anything. We expect, he said in his words, that, a lot of these things have turned out not to be true. I'm sure that doesn't give Yovanovitch much faith in how the investigation will end up.
Absolutely. All right. So Emma, on CNN last night, Parnas said he should be the #1 witness. Is he likely to be someone that Democrats will call or try to get as a witness? I mean, we know that they want John Bolton. They're still sort of working their way through all the material he recently dumped. So, is he someone that they're likely to push for at this point?
Democrats have a lot of really important decisions to make about who they push for and at what point, and weighing the pluses and the negatives. This is, sort of a similar case in a lot of ways as compelling in testimony from Gordon Sondland during the House depositions when the House was pursuing impeachment charges against the president. You had someone who has changed his testimony, who's changed his story. Even Democrats had to acknowledge that there were some concerns about his credibility given all of the different variations of the events that took place, where at first, the president didn't do anything wrong and then the president did something wrong. Lev Parnas has a credibility concern as well that Democrats need to consider, and they're going to have to weigh the risks with the rewards here. I've heard, colleagues discuss just now that Democrats think that, he must come and testify, that he has information that would be damning to the president and helpful to their case in arguing for his removal from office. So they're going to have to decide just how much of a risk they want to take in putting him up on the stand and letting the president's legal team potentially denigrate him and try to undermine his credibility.
And speaking of the president's legal team that Emma just brought up, Jill, let's talk about that for a moment. What went into the decisions to pick this team of lawyers? What roles will they play? And why do you think Giuliani was left off that list?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting roster here, and some surprises that had not leaked ahead of time, which is unusual for this administration. Obviously, Alan Dershowitz, the former Harvard professor who has been a staunch defender of the president on television, is officially part of the team. It sounds like his role, though, is going to be, he's described it as a bipartisan role, so he'll be up there talking about the Constitution, talking about impeachment in a historical context, and making the case to Senate jurors that the president doesn't deserve to be impeached for these crimes or these alleged wrongdoings. You'll have Ken Starr up there, who is also somebody who has defended the president repeatedly on television, now added to the team. It's notable, however, who is not on the president's legal team. There are no members of the House, some of the president's staunchest defenders. There had been some back and forth about people like Jim Jordan potentially joining the president's team. They are not on that roster. Also, Rudy Giuliani has made very clear that he would like to be out there in that room defending the president, and a decision has been made instead to keep him on the outside, at least for now. I assume he will continue speaking to reporters, potentially defending the president on television. But look, there are a lot of people in the president's inner circle who question, the value of Rudy Giuliani, sometimes questioning whether he does more harm for the president than he does good. Of course, the president has always defended Giuliani, values his opinion, but at this point, he is going to be on the outside of this investigation.
And Natalie, what can we expect to see over the next few days heading up to the Senate trial?
Well, we know that senators will return Tuesday afternoon at 1 p.m., and that's when they will decide on or vote on the rules resolution, really setting the ground rules and what this trial will look like. And that is expected to be a potentially contentious process because amendments can be proposed from the Senate floor, and that means that there could be calls from Democratic lawmakers to hear from witnesses right away, something that the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has been opposed to. McConnell wants to follow the model used during the Clinton trial, which called for opening arguments across both sides to be heard first, and then a written question period where senators can submit written questions, and then the decision being made on witnesses. During the Clinton trial, that resolution was actually approved unanimously by senators who had an all-senators meeting behind closed doors to hash out the rules of that process. This time around, Democratic lawmakers are saying it's a completely different type of impeachment process, and that they would like to hear from witnesses at the outset. So we could see that debate play out on Tuesday. I'm also hearing from one source, Senate aide, that opening arguments not likely on Tuesday because this rules process could take a while. So arguments could potentially happen as early as Wednesday. That from one Senate source this afternoon.
Oh, interesting information there. All right, Natalie Brand on Capitol Hill, Emma Dumain and Jill Colvin in Washington. Thanks to all of you.